I agree that I wrongly took all of that money, Your Honor, did all of these crimes. I did terrible things. Each of you placed your trust in me. As Alex Murdaugh stood before the judge, his voice cracked with emotion, yet his eyes remained dry. It was a confession that acknowledged years of deceit, crimes that spanned financial schemes, lies, and deep betrayals. But the truth was far more twisted than this single admission. By the time these words were spoken, Alex had already been convicted of a far graver crime, the brutal murders of his wife and son. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with the weight of his words, as he accepted a 27-year sentence for numerous financial crimes. But it was the double life sentences handed down just months earlier, in March 2023, for the killings of his wife, Maggie, and his youngest son, Paul, that had already cemented his fall from grace. What could drive a man from one of South Carolina's most prominent legal families to such a dark place? The answer lies in a complex story of power, deceit, and desperation. To understand Alex Murdaugh's story is to understand the legacy he was born into. The Murdaugh family had wielded unparalleled legal power in South Carolina's Lowcountry for nearly a century. Alex's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had each served as the region's top prosecutor, cementing the Murdaugh name as a symbol of justice and influence. Their tenure spanned nearly 90 years, a near dynasty that made them fixtures in the local courts and society. Alex followed in the footsteps of his forefathers, becoming a personal injury attorney at the family firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elsroth, and Dietrich. He lived on a sprawling estate with his wife, Maggie, and their two sons, Buster and Paul, enjoying a life of affluence and respect. But there were cracks in the facade, a legacy weighed down by secrets and lies that would eventually be exposed in the most public and tragic of ways. The unraveling of the Murdaughs began with the death of someone considered almost like family. Gloria Satterfield had worked as a housekeeper for the Murdaughs for over 2 decades, helping to raise the boys and earning a place in their hearts. But in 2018, Gloria's life took a tragic turn when she suffered a fatal fall on the steps of the Murdaugh estate. Her sudden death was a shock to many, and while the Murdaughs offered sympathy, Alex was already devising a plan, one that would exploit her death for financial gain. Shortly after Gloria's fall, Alex convinced her grieving sons to hire his friend, attorney Corey Fleming, to represent them in a wrongful death settlement against him. The proposal seemed strange, but the Satterfields trusted Alex, believing his assurance that he had their best interests at heart. What they didn't know was that Alex had orchestrated the settlement to siphon off over $4.3 million, funneling the money into a secret bank account he'd named Forge, a fake entity meant to appear like a legitimate financial services company. The Satterfields never saw a dime of that settlement. While Gloria's death raised few suspicions at the time, it was a harbinger of the dark path that Alex was on, one paved with greed and deception. The real storm, however, was still on the horizon. The Murdaugh's carefully curated image began to crumble in earnest on a cold February night in 2019. Paul Murdaugh, then just 19 years old, and a group of his friends set out for a night of fun, cruising on a boat registered in his father's name. Among the passengers was Mallory Beach, a lively and popular young woman who was looking forward to a promising future. The night started innocently enough with an oyster roast, but alcohol soon became a significant part of the evening. Paul, known to friends for his reckless behavior when drinking, had used his brother Buster's ID to buy alcohol earlier in the day. The effects were soon evident as he became belligerent, even shoving his girlfriend, Morgan Doughty, and slapping her across the face. Despite his obvious intoxication, Paul insisted on steering the boat back, much to the concern of his friends. The atmosphere on the boat grew increasingly tense as they approached the narrow waters near Archer's Creek. It was dark, and the fog seemed to cling to the surface of the river, swallowing up the boat's lights. As Paul took the wheel, his grip unsteady and his eyes unfocused, the boat surged forward at a dangerous speed. Then, at 2:17 a.m., disaster struck. The boat collided violently with a piling on the Archers Creek Bridge, sending everyone on board tumbling into the cold, dark water. Panic set in as the passengers fought to stay afloat and clamber back to safety. But one voice was missing: Mallory's. For 8 days, volunteers and search crews scoured the riverbanks for any sign of her. The wait was agonizing for her family, who held on to hope even as each day without answers seemed to dim it. Then, on the 8th day, Mallory's body was found miles downstream. The autopsy would later reveal she had died from drowning and blunt force trauma. Paul was charged with multiple felonies, including boating under the influence causing death. The case attracted intense public scrutiny, not only because of the Murdaugh family's prominence, but also because of suspicions that they were using their influence to protect Paul from consequences. It appeared to some that justice was bending to the will of the Murdaughs, as it had for decades. Paul's trial was still pending when, on June 7th, 2021, another tragedy struck the Murdaugh family, one that would forever change the narrative from rumors of corruption to outright horror. It was just after 10 p.m. when Alex Murdaugh called 911, his voice trembling with panic. "No, ma'am, I've been gone. I just came back," he stammered as he responds. His wife, Maggie, and son, Paul, were found lying near the dog kennels on the family's hunting estate, each with multiple gunshot wounds. And according to Alex Murdaugh, he came back home to meet the gruesome scene. In the aftermath, investigators descended upon the sprawling 1,700-acre property, trying to piece together the events leading up to the killings. Alex told authorities he had been visiting his mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's, and her caregiver during the time of the murders. But evidence would soon emerge that contradicted his alibi. A video found on Paul's phone, recorded just moments before the murders, captured the voices of 3 people near the kennels: Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This revelation placed Alex at the scene shortly before the killings, raising suspicions that he might be involved. The prosecution argued that Alex, facing mounting pressure from the wrongful death lawsuit filed by Mallory Beach's family and the financial schemes that were unraveling, had resorted to murder in a desperate attempt to gain sympathy and buy time. It was a theory that painted a portrait of a man pushed to the edge, willing to sacrifice even his own family to avoid the impending collapse of his life. Just when the story couldn't seem any stranger, a bizarre twist unfolded. On September 4th, 2021, less than 3 months after the double murders, Alex was shot in the head while changing a tire on a rural Hampton County road. His injuries, however, turned out to be superficial. As speculation mounted, the truth behind the shooting emerged. It wasn't a random attack. Alex had arranged for a man named Curtis Edward Smith, a former client and distant cousin, to kill him. The motive? To allow his surviving son, Buster, to collect a $10 million life insurance payout. The scheme fell apart when Smith claimed that he tried to stop Alex from shooting himself, and the gun went off during the struggle. The roadside shooting brought even more attention to the Murdaugh saga, casting further doubt on Alex's state of mind and desperation. As investigations deepened, authorities began to uncover the full extent of his financial wrongdoings, including embezzling millions from clients, his law firm, and the estate of Gloria Satterfield. Over the following months, investigators would unravel a staggering web of financial crimes that spanned over a decade. Alex Murdaugh faced more than 100 charges related to fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and breach of trust. Clients who had entrusted him with settlements for personal injury cases discovered that he had stolen funds intended to cover medical expenses and support families devastated by tragedy. As these stories emerged, the public shock turned to outrage. It seemed that Alex had preyed upon the very people who needed him most, exploiting their vulnerabilities for his gain. But it wasn't just the living who fell victim to Alex's greed. The investigation into Gloria Satterfield's death was reopened, raising questions about whether her fall was truly accidental. While the authorities stopped short of linking her death directly to foul play, the financial exploitation of her grieving family painted a damning picture. The double murder trial commenced in January 2023 at the Colleton County Courthouse. It was a spectacle that drew the attention of the nation, not just because of the crimes, but because of who Alex Murdaugh was. A man born into privilege, now facing the possibility of dying in prison. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and members of the community who had watched the Murdaugh family for generations. As the trial unfolded, the prosecution presented damning evidence, including the cell phone video that placed Alex at the scene minutes before the murders and forensic analysis that contradicted his timeline. The defense argued that there was no clear motive for Alex to kill his wife and son, describing the state's case as built on theories and conjectures. They painted Alex as a flawed man battling an opioid addiction and the weight of his financial troubles, but insisted that he was not a killer. Alex himself took the stand, weeping as he declared, "I didn't shoot my wife or my son," and explaining that his lies about his whereabouts were due to paranoia from drug use. Yet, the jury saw through the tears. After just 3 hours of deliberation, they returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. The conviction carried 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders, and Judge Clifton Newman's words were biting. He told him that his life of duplicity has come back to haunt him. The verdict was a seismic shift, not just for the Murdaugh family, but for the entire community. For decades, the Murdaughs had been synonymous with power and influence in the Low Country. Now, the family name was a cautionary tale of corruption, hubris, and downfall. Despite the conviction, the story did not end there. Alex's legal team immediately filed an appeal, alleging jury tampering and procedural misconduct during the trial. In August 2024, the South Carolina Supreme Court granted a motion to hear the appeal, keeping the possibility of a new trial alive. Meanwhile, the Murdaugh estate was embroiled in a series of lawsuits. On the 16th of October 2024, Alex Murdaugh settled a lawsuit brought by the family of a teen killed in a boat crash involving Murdaugh's youngest son, that prosecutors said provoked the disgraced South Carolina attorney to later kill his wife and their son, who wrecked the boat. The agreement by an insurer to pay the $500,000 policy Alex Murdaugh had on the boat ends the wrongful death suit that ultimately pried open Murdaugh's finances and laid bare his schemes to steal millions from his clients and his law firm. In all of these, so many questions left unanswered. But did settling the lawsuit for $500,000 really explain why Alex Murdaugh would go to such extreme lengths? Could the pressure from the lawsuit have pushed him to do something as horrible as killing his wife and son? Or is there a darker reason behind his actions that no one knows about yet? Did he see their deaths as a way to get rid of the trouble Paul's legal problems were causing for his finances? Or was it part of a desperate plan to get sympathy and delay the fallout as his lies started to come to light? The big question is, was it the lawsuit itself that pushed him over the edge, or was it the fear that all his secrets would be exposed that made him take such a terrible step? As Alex languished behind bars, his surviving son, Buster, remained loyal, visiting his father and insisting on his innocence. In contrast, Randy Murdaugh, Alex's older brother, maintained a distance, quietly expressing doubts about the official timeline of events. "He knows more than what he's saying. He's not telling the truth, in my opinion, about everything there," Randy stated in a rare interview. The Murdaugh saga remains far from over, with ongoing investigations, appeals, and the questions that are still left unanswered about what truly drove a man like Alex to commit such heinous acts. Was it desperation, greed, or something even deeper? As more details emerge, the world continues to watch, gripped by a story that is equal parts tragedy and cautionary story. In the end, the Murdaugh's story serves as a dark reminder that power can corrupt, and when a legacy is built on lies, it is bound to crumble. The dynasty that had once stood as a pillar of justice in the Low Country now lay in ruins, its reputation forever stained by the actions of a man who had betrayed his own family, his clients, and his community. And as for Alex Murdaugh, he sits in a prison cell, a fallen king stripped of his throne, haunted by the ghosts of those he wronged and the echoes of the life he could have lived had he chosen a different path. As we close this chapter on the Murdaugh case, we're left with heavy questions and powerful lessons. Alex Murdaugh's story reminds us how quickly power, privilege, and unchecked ambition can erode our moral compass. It's a chilling example of what can happen when the desire to maintain status outweighs the loyalty and love for family, friends, and community. Here are some questions to think about. In a world that often prioritizes success and wealth, what would you be willing to sacrifice to hold on to your integrity? How far do you think someone could go to maintain a false image, even if it means hurting others? And do you believe that justice was truly served in this case? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your own perspectives on the lessons you can draw from this story. And if you were intrigued by this story, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. We've got many more chilling stories to unravel, and you won't want to miss a single episode. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay mindful and stay safe.